The quiet evening at the gas station. It was a late evening, and the small gas station on the edge of the highway looked almost empty. The sky had a soft orange glow fading into purple as the sun slowly disappeared. Cars rushed by in the distance, but here, everything felt slower, quieter. The sound of the wind brushing against the trees mixed with the faint hum of the gas pumps. The world outside seemed to move fast, but here, life paused for a moment. Keanu Reeves had stopped at this gas station on his way home. He wore his usual simple clothes, a plain shirt and dark jeans, nothing that screamed Hollywood. To anyone watching, he looked like an ordinary man, tired from a long day, just wanting a bit of peace. He carried himself in a way that did not demand attention, yet something about his presence always drew people in. Humility was written in the way he stood, in the way he spoke, and in the way he moved. He stepped out of his car slowly, looking around with his quiet eyes. The kind of eyes that always seemed to notice more than they showed. While filling up the tank, he saw her, a young girl maybe in her late teens, standing near the small convenience store attached to the station. She wore a loose hoodie and jeans, and one thing was clear even from a distance. She had a prosthetic leg. Her movements were slow, hesitant, as if she had grown used to people staring, as if each step carried not just her weight but the weight of judgment from strangers. She was trying to adjust the bag she carried, but it kept slipping from her shoulder. When it fell, she bent down awkwardly, her balance shaken, and almost stumbled. A few people nearby noticed but quickly looked away, pretending not to see. Keanu kept watching. His heart felt a small pull, the kind of pull that reminded him of all the struggles people go through quietly. Battles fought without applause, without cameras, without help. The girl picked up her bag and looked around, her face carrying both strength and tiredness. Her eyes held something heavy, but they also had sparks of resilience. She noticed Keanu looking at her. For a second, she seemed embarrassed, as if she did not want pity. But Keanu's gaze was not pity. It was respect. He walked over, calm and steady, as if every step had meaning. "Do you need help with that?" His voice was soft, kind, without pressure. The girl hesitated. She was not used to people offering help without hidden motives or without judgment. Most of the time, when someone helped, it came with stares, with whispered words, with questions she did not want to answer. But something about this man's tone felt different. There was no pity, no weight, just respect. "I'm fine," she said quietly. But her voice shook just enough to betray her struggle. She tried to lift the bag again, but it was heavier than it looked. Keanu smiled gently, waiting for her to decide. He did not rush forward. He did not take control. He gave her the space to keep her dignity. After a pause, she sighed and nodded. "Okay, maybe a little help?" He picked up the bag with ease and set it back on her shoulder, adjusting the strap so it fit better. "There you go," he said with a nod, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. The girl looked at him again, this time with curiosity. His face seemed familiar, but she could not place him. He did not look like a celebrity right now, just a man who cared enough to help. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu nodded again, still calm. "You're welcome." As she stood there, something unexpected happened. Another customer, a man filling his car on the other side, recognized Keanu. His eyes widened, and he pulled out his phone quickly. Whispers began to spread. "That's Keanu Reeves," someone murmured. The girl froze, her eyes snapping to Keanu. Suddenly, everything made sense. That familiar face, the quiet humility. She realized who he was. Her heart skipped. This was not just any stranger. This was a man known around the world. Yet here he was, helping her at a gas station, without cameras, without headlines, without trying to be noticed. Her mind filled with questions. Why him? Why now? Why her? And yet, the bigger question rose inside her. What happens when the kindness of someone famous collides with the quiet struggles of an ordinary life? She had no idea that this moment, this small act at a gas station, was the beginning of something that would shock everyone who heard it later. Because sometimes kindness is not just a single action. Sometimes it starts a chain of events that changes lives in ways no one could imagine. And on this quiet evening, with the sun fading and the world moving past, something had already begun. The girl's silence and Keanu's choice. The girl stood quietly, her bag now resting better on her shoulder because of Keanu's help. But inside her, emotions collided. Gratitude, surprise, nervousness. She did not know how to handle them all at once. She kept her eyes lowered, as if afraid that if she looked at him too long, the truth of who he was would overwhelm her. Keanu noticed the way she pulled her hoodie tighter around her, as if hiding. He understood that look. It was the look of someone who had carried too much weight alone, someone who had learned to live in silence so that the world would not crush them further. He did not want to make her feel exposed. Instead of asking questions, he leaned against the small railing near the store and simply said, "The evenings here are quiet, aren't they?" His voice was calm, as though he was speaking to an old friend. The girl blinked, confused. She had expected him to ask about her leg, about her story, about things she did not want to explain again. But he didn't. He talked about the sky, about the quiet, about the ordinary. "Yes," she replied softly. "It's peaceful." She finally raised her eyes to look at him. There was no judgment there, no hidden stare at her prosthetic leg, just presence. She felt her chest loosen, the weight inside her easing just a little. But the moment did not stay calm for long. The man across the station, still holding his phone, stepped closer. "You're Keanu Reeves, aren't you?" he asked excitedly. His voice carried, and a couple more people looked over. The girl froze again, suddenly aware of the eyes turning toward them. Her heart pounded. She hated being stared at, and now this was happening. Keanu, however, did not flinch. He turned toward the man and gave a small smile. "Yeah, but right now I'm just here like everyone else, filling up my car." His tone was friendly, but there was a quiet firmness in his words. The man laughed nervously, lowering his phone. He had expected a big reaction, maybe even a pose for a photo. Instead, he found a man who refused to let fame interrupt kindness. The girl whispered almost to herself, "Why are you being so normal?" Keanu looked back at her. "Because being normal is the only way to be human," he said gently. "We all need help sometimes, and sometimes we all need to feel seen without being judged." His words sank deep into her. No one had ever said it like that to her before. Most people spoke to her with pity, with sympathy, with advice she never asked for. But this man spoke like he understood her silence, like he respected it. Still, she could not shake her doubts. "People don't usually stop for me," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "They look, they whisper, and then they walk away." Keanu tilted his head. "That says more about them than it does about you." Her throat tightened, her eyes stung, but she refused to cry here, in front of strangers. Yet something about his words pressed against the walls she had built for so long. Then, just as the air grew heavy with unspoken emotions, something unexpected happened. A sudden sound of metal clattering echoed from the far side of the station. A car had pulled in too quickly, and the driver had dropped a metal canister while stepping out. It rolled across the pavement, stopping near the girl's foot. She bent down to pick it up, but her balance shifted awkwardly on her prosthetic leg. In an instant, she wavered, about to fall. Before she even realized, Keanu's hand was there, steadying her shoulder. Firm, warm, unshaking. "I've got you," he said, steady and calm. The girl's heart thudded, not because she had almost fallen, but because of the way he said it. Not as a stranger offering pity, but as someone who meant it deeply. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. Something inside her shifted. Maybe she thought this was not just a random encounter. Maybe this was meant to happen. What neither of them knew was that this small moment, the almost fall, the steady hand, the words, "I've got you," was about to lead into a series of events that neither of them could predict. Because sometimes, fate does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers at a gas station under fading light, between two people who never expected their paths to cross, and soon, everyone would know about it. The truth she never told. The girl stood frozen for a moment, feeling the warmth of Keanu's steady hand on her shoulder. No one had held her like that in a long time, not with pity, not with hesitation, but with quiet strength. She pulled back slowly, still shaken, still unsure if she could trust the moment. Keanu gave her space. He always did. He let his hand fall, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "Are you okay?" he asked, as if the world outside them did not exist. She nodded quickly, though her lips trembled. "I'm fine," she whispered. But inside, she was not fine at all. Her heart raced, her chest felt heavy. She had lived her life building walls, and yet, in a few minutes with this man, cracks were showing. The customer who had recognized Keanu was still nearby, watching, itching to pull his phone back out. But one look at Keanu's face kept him silent. There was a quiet warning there, not anger, but a plea for respect. And strangely, the man listened. The girl shifted her weight on her prosthetic leg, wincing slightly as the strap dug into her skin. Keanu noticed immediately. "Does it hurt?" he asked gently. Her eyes widened. She wanted to say no, but something in his tone made her pause. She shook her head faintly, then sighed. "Sometimes. It's not the pain that's worse, though. It's everything else." Keanu tilted his head, waiting. He never pushed. He let silence do the asking. She looked away toward the setting sun. "People don't see me as a person anymore. They see the leg. They see what's missing, not what's here. Every room I walk into, it feels like that's all I am." Her words spilled out, shaky but raw. For a long moment, Keanu said nothing. His silence was not empty, it was listening. Truly listening. Then he spoke softly. "I don't see what's missing. I see what you've carried, and that's not small." Her throat tightened again. She wanted to speak, to tell him more, but the words fought inside her. Finally, she whispered, "I don't usually talk about it. People don't stay long enough to hear." Keanu's eyes held hers steadily. "I'm here. I'll listen." Her chest ached at his words. No one had said that to her in years. She had been left behind before, by friends who grew tired of her struggles, by strangers who offered fake kindness, even by family who thought silence was easier than care. And here was this man, someone she barely knew, offering to listen like her story mattered. But before she could continue, the air shifted. A loud car pulled into the station, its music blasting, its headlights glaring. 3 young men jumped out, laughing too loudly, throwing their empty cups on the ground. Their voices carried arrogance, sharp and careless. The girl tensed immediately. She knew that kind of laughter. She had heard it before, on sidewalks, in malls, even in her own school. Laughter that turned into whispers. Whispers that turned into cruel words. Keanu noticed her stiffen. His eyes flicked toward the men. They hadn't noticed her yet, but it was only a matter of time. And then it happened. One of the men glanced her way, his laughter faltering. His eyes fell on her prosthetic leg. He nudged his friend, smirking. The girl's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. But before a single word could leave their mouths, Keanu stepped forward slightly, his body language calm, yet protective. His presence was steady, like a wall of quiet strength between her and the cruelty she feared. He did not raise his voice. He did not glare. But something in the way he stood made the men hesitate. The girl looked at him, stunned. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Her heart whispered something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in years. Maybe she was not alone. Maybe, just maybe, someone truly saw her. And as the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the station, she realized her story was about to take a turn she never imagined. The unspoken shield. The girl's heart pounded as the 3 young men walked closer. Their laughter was sharp, the kind that made the air feel heavy and unsafe. She gripped her bag tighter, wishing she could disappear, wishing the ground would just open and swallow her. This was the part of life she hated the most, when eyes turned to her leg, when whispers grew into words that stung deeper than knives. But before the first insult could escape their lips, Keanu stepped slightly in front of her. It was not dramatic. He did not shout, he did not threaten. He simply moved, his body language calm but firm, like a silent shield. The men looked at him, confused for a moment. Then one of them recognized his face. His smirk widened. "Wait a second. Isn't this Keanu Reeves?" he said, his voice mocking more than admiring. The other 2 laughed, but their laughter was different now, nervous, almost uncertain. The girl held her breath. She expected Keanu to be embarrassed, to step back, to leave her standing alone. Most people did. But Keanu did not move away. Instead, he looked at the men with the same calm eyes he had shown her. "Evening," he said quietly. Nothing more. Just that. For some reason, the word carried weight. His tone was steady, his presence unshakable. The laughter faltered. One of the men tried again. "You're out here helping. What, charity cases now?" he sneered, nodding toward the girl. The words sliced through her. She wanted to shrink, to run, to hide. Shame filled her chest, burning like fire. But before she could react, Keanu spoke. "You don't know her," he said evenly. "So maybe don't speak about her like that." The air went silent. There was no anger in his voice, no shouting, just truth, spoken simply, like a stone dropped in still water. The men shifted uncomfortably. They had expected a fight, something loud they could laugh about later. Instead, they were met with calm dignity, a kind of strength they could not mock. The girl looked at Keanu, stunned. No one had ever stood up for her like that. Not without making it worse, not without drawing more attention, but he had done it in a way that lifted her, not broke her. Her throat tightened, and for the first time in years, she wanted to believe she was worth defending. The men muttered something under their breath and finally turned away, pretending they had better things to do. Their laughter faded as they walked toward the store. The girl's body shook, not from fear anymore, but from something else. Relief, disbelief, and a small spark of hope, she whispered, almost unable to find her voice. "Why did you do that?" Keanu looked at her, his expression soft. "Because no one deserves to feel small for being who they are." Her eyes burned with tears she could not stop this time. She looked down quickly, embarrassed, but Keanu pretended not to notice. He gave her the gift of privacy in her pain. The silence between them was not heavy now. It was warm, almost safe. The girl finally breathed out, her voice breaking. "People don't usually stay." Keanu's reply was quiet, steady, and certain. Then maybe they were never the right people. Her heart clenched. Those words stayed with her, carving deep into the walls she had built. But just as she thought the night was calming, a sound broke through again. From the store, angry voices echoed. Glass clinked, something fell. It was the same three men. This time they were arguing with the cashier. Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm shifting into alertness. The girl tensed again, fear flooding back. The quiet evening at the gas station was no longer quiet. It was about to become something much bigger. The storm inside the store. The girl's pulse quickened as the noise from the small store grew louder. She could hear raised voices, the crash of something heavy hitting the counter, and the muffled sound of fear in the cashier's tone. Her instincts told her this was more than just an argument. She glanced at Keanu. His face was calm, but his eyes had sharpened, focused. He did not rush, he did not panic, but she could see the shift in him. He was no longer just a kind stranger helping her with her bag. He was someone preparing to step into something dangerous, someone who carried quiet courage like a shield. "Stay here," he said softly, his tone more protective than commanding. The girl froze. Part of her wanted to nod, to stay in safety. But another part of her, the part that had lived too long in silence and fear, whispered no. She did not want to be left behind again. Not when this man had just stood by her. Inside the store, one of the men shouted, "Just give us the cash, old man, and nobody gets hurt." The words chilled her. Her heart sank. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was turning into something darker. Keanu moved forward slowly, steady as if every step mattered. When he pushed open the glass door, the bell above it jingled softly. A strange sound in the middle of all that tension. The men turned, startled. One of them still held a bottle. The other had his hand inside his jacket as if hiding something. The cashier, a man in his 50s, looked pale, his hands trembling as he stood frozen behind the counter. The girl stood outside, her breath caught in her throat. Every part of her screaming to move, but her legs refusing. Keanu's voice broke the silence. It was calm, even steady. "This isn't the way," he said. The men laughed harshly, but it was nervous laughter. "What are you, some kind of hero?" One of them sneered. Keanu shook his head. "No heroes here. Just people making choices. You don't want to make the wrong one tonight." The words hung heavy. There was no threat, No violence, just truth spoken in the kind of tone that could make anyone stop and think. But one of the men slammed the bottle against the counter, shards flying. The girl gasped softly from the doorway. Keanu didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on them, steady, unshaken. "You think you scare us just because you're famous," the man spat. Keanu's reply was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried. "Fame doesn't matter. Kindness does. And right now, you still have a chance to choose it." The girl could not believe what she was seeing. No shouting, no fists, no anger, just calm strength standing in the face of chaos. For a moment, the men wavered. They looked at each other, uncertain. But pride is a dangerous thing, and one of them stepped closer, raising his arm as if to strike. The girl's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but she was frozen. Keanu moved in one fluid motion, not with violence, but with control. He grabbed the man's wrist before the strike could land, twisting just enough to stop him, not enough to harm him. The bottle clattered to the floor, rolling away. Silence filled the store. Even the other two men froze, shocked by the sudden shift. Keanu let go slowly, his voice still calm. "Walk away now. Before you do something you'll carry forever." The men hesitated, breathing heavy, their arrogance cracking under the weight of his words. The girl stood at the doorway, her heart racing, her hands trembling. She had never seen anything like it. Not a fight, not a movie scene, but real human strength. Strength that came not from power, but from humility. Finally, one of the men cursed under his breath and backed toward the door. The others followed, their steps uneven, their faces burning with shame. They pushed past her, muttering, and stormed out into the night. Silence settled inside the store. The cashier sank into his chair, shaking with relief. Keanu stepped back, his breathing steady, his expression calm again, as if nothing had happened. The girl could not move. She stared at him, her chest heavy with something new, something she could not yet name. Respect, awe, maybe even hope. And in that silence, she realized something important. This was not just a chance encounter. This was a turning point in her life, because sometimes a single night, a single choice, and a single stranger can open doors you never knew existed. The story she never shared, the night had grown quiet again. The three men were gone, their laughter replaced by the distant hum of passing cars on the highway. The cashier, still shaken, thanked Keanu over and over, his voice trembling. Keanu only nodded, as if what he had done was nothing extraordinary. To him, it was just the right thing to do. Outside the store, the girl sat on a small bench near the pumps. Her bag rested beside her, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Her heart still raced from what had just happened, but her thoughts raced even more. She had just seen something that felt impossible. Calmness defeating cruelty, dignity silencing arrogance. When Keanu stepped out of the store and joined her on the bench, she looked down quickly, not trusting her own eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her throat ached with unspoken words. Keanu did not push. He sat beside her in silence, letting the still night wrap around them. It was that kind of silence that did not demand answers, but quietly waited for them. Finally, her voice cracked through the quiet. "No one has ever stood for me like that." He turned to her, his gaze calm. "Then it's about time someone did." Her eyes burned, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "You don't know what it's like. Every day, I wake up and the first thing I see is this leg. I don't feel whole. I don't feel enough." Keanu listened, his face steady, his silence giving her permission to go on. "When I lost my leg," she continued, her voice trembling, "everything changed. People who said they were my friends stopped calling. Even family. They treated me like I was broken, like I was a burden. I learned to keep quiet, to hide, to survive without asking anyone for help. Because when you ask, people leave." Her words cracked at the edges, raw and unpolished. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but soft. "You are not broken, and you are not a burden. You're here. You're alive. You're stronger than most people will ever understand." Her breath hitched, and tears finally slipped down her cheeks. She tried to turn away, embarrassed, but Keanu did not stare. Instead, he looked at the road ahead, giving her space to cry without shame. "I hate crying in front of people," she whispered. "Crying doesn't make you weak," Keanu said gently. "It makes you honest." Those words pierced her heart. She had spent years hiding every tear, convincing herself that silence was strength. But here was a man telling her that honesty was strength too. For a long time, she sat there, her tears quiet, her chest slowly loosening. After a while, she asked the question that had been circling her mind. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Keanu finally looked at her, his eyes calm and kind. "Because kindness doesn't need a reason. And maybe because I've known what it feels like to lose. I've known how heavy silence can be." His words carried something deeper, something she could feel but not fully understand. It was as if his kindness came not from a perfect life, but from a life that had seen pain and still chose gentleness. Her tears slowed. She breathed deeply, feeling lighter, though she could not explain why. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly saw her, not the prosthetic, not the missing part of her, but the person she was beneath it all. And in that moment, sitting under the dim lights of a lonely gas station, she realized something. Maybe fate had brought her here. Maybe fate had brought him here. This meeting was not an accident. It was the beginning of something that neither of them could yet imagine. The night that changed everything, the girl sat in silence beside Keanu, her tears drying slowly, her chest still heavy but no longer suffocating. She had spoken truths she had never said aloud, and somehow they had not broken her. Instead, they had freed her. Keanu remained beside her, steady as the night, not trying to fix everything, not offering false promises, just presence. And that, more than anything, was what she needed. Minutes passed before the cashier stepped outside. His hands were still shaking, but his voice was filled with gratitude. "You saved me in there," he said, looking at Keanu. Then he looked at the girl, and his expression softened. "Both of you helped me more than you know." The girl blinked in surprise. "Me?" she asked quietly. The cashier nodded. "You stood there. You didn't run. Sometimes courage isn't about fighting. It's about staying when it would be easier to leave." His words sank into her like sunlight into cold skin. No one had ever called her courageous before. But now sitting there, she realized maybe she was. Maybe surviving every day with a prosthetic, with stares, with silence. That was courage, too. Keanu gave her a small nod, as if to say he agreed. As the night grew darker, a few more people at the station whispered among themselves. By now they all knew who Keanu was. Phones had recorded pieces of what happened, the confrontation, the quiet way he had disarmed cruelty. And soon, those clips would spread far beyond this small gas station. But the girl didn't care about the cameras. She cared about the way Keanu had seen her, defended her, and most of all, respected her. She turned to him softly. "You could have just walked away tonight. Why didn't you?" Keanu looked at her for a long moment, his voice calm and certain. "Because walking away would have been easier. But easier isn't always right." Her heart trembled at his words. When it was time to leave, Keanu stood, and so did she. She adjusted her bag, but this time her movements weren't weighed down with shame. There was a lightness, a quiet strength in her step. He opened his car door, then paused, looking at her one last time. "Whatever the world tells you, remember, you are not less. You are more, and one day you'll see it too." Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small for what he had given her. She only whispered, "You changed tonight for me." Keanu smiled gently, nodded, and got into his car. With the soft roar of the engine, he drove away into the night, disappearing into the road like a shadow carried by the headlights. The girl stood there for a long time, the wind brushing her face, her heart no longer the same. The next morning, the world began to notice. Clips of the night spread online. Keanu's quiet strength, the way he defended her, the way he spoke. Millions watched, millions shared, but what mattered most was not the headlines. What mattered was that somewhere, a young girl with a prosthetic leg finally believed she was not invisible. And in the days that followed, her life began to change. Strangers smiled instead of staring. She found the courage to speak more openly, to stand taller, to see her prosthetic not as a mark of weakness, but as proof of her survival. The internet called it another story of Keanu Reeves's kindness. But for the girl, it was more than a story. It was the night someone reminded her she was enough, and sometimes that reminder is all it takes to begin again.